Get out of my house. The words hit before Emily Carter even understood what she'd done wrong. She was 11, sitting cross-legged by the fireplace where the staff's kids were supposed to stay small and quiet, and now every guest at the Whitmore dinner party had turned to stare at her mother. "Please," Diane Carter said, still in her gray uniform, a stack of dessert plates forgotten in her hands. She meant no disrespect, Mrs. Whitmore. She was mocking my guests. Barbara Whitmore's eyes cut to Emily like a slammed door, mimicking that ridiculous accent of hers for laughs. In front of the Hendersons, in front of the senator. Emily hadn't been mocking anyone. She'd been correcting a word. Quietly, almost by accident, when Tyler Henderson, 16 and smug in his blazer, had butchered a line of Latin during his father's toast, twisting a phrase from Cicero into gibberish, just to get a laugh from the table. Emily had murmured the correct pronunciation under her breath, half to herself. She hadn't meant for anyone to hear. But Tyler had heard, and Tyler didn't like being corrected by the housekeeper's daughter. "She's smarter than you, Tyler," he'd announced to the room, voice dripping with mockery. "Say something else, little maid girl. Say something in your gutter Spanish." Emily had felt heat crawl up her neck. She hadn't answered in Spanish. She'd answered in flawless, unbroken Latin, a full sentence, elegant and precise, the kind of Latin that took scholars years to master. The kind that stopped a table of Ohio's wealthiest families mid-bite, forks suspended halfway to open mouths. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. Then Barbara Whitmore shot up so fast her chair barked against the floor. That had been 4 minutes ago. Now Emily stood by the front door with her mother's hand clamped tight around her wrist, both of them being steered outside by a housekeeper twice Emily's size, while 20 of the wealthiest people in Columbus watched a woman who scrubbed their floors get thrown out into the January cold with her daughter. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm begging you," Diane said, and something in Emily cracked to hear her mother beg. Diane Carter did not beg. Diane Carter had crossed 2,000 miles with a baby on her hip and calloused hands, and never once, not once, asked anyone for anything. "This job, we need this job." "My daughter didn't mean—" "Where did she learn that?" Barbara's tone shifted. Underneath the fury was something else now, something closer to fear. "Latin like that isn't taught in a public school. Diane, who taught your daughter to speak like that?" Diane's face drained of color. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said too fast. Emily glanced up at her mother, confused. She'd been reading the same worn leather book every night since she was 6, the one her mother kept locked in a drawer, the one with pages thin as moth wings, no title on the cracked spine. Her mother had never once taught her the language inside it. Emily had simply understood it, the way some kids understood music without lessons. "You're lying to me," Barbara said quietly, stepping closer. "I've seen that look before, 15 years ago, on someone else's face." "Please don't," Diane whispered, and it wasn't about the job anymore. It was something else, something that made the hair rise on Emily's arms. "Don't what, Diane?" Barbara's voice dropped so only the 3 of them could hear it. "Don't ask why a housekeeper's daughter recites Cicero like she was born reciting it, or don't ask why you flinched the second I said the name Henderson." Diane said nothing. Her hand wouldn't stop shaking around Emily's wrist. "Get out," Barbara said again, louder now, straightening her shoulders for her guests. "Both of you, now." But as the housekeeper pushed them toward the door, Emily caught something in Barbara Whitmore's face that didn't match her words at all. Not disgust, not triumph. Recognition. The cold January air hit Emily the moment the door shut behind them, and she turned to her mother, whose eyes had gone glassy, whose hands still hadn't stopped trembling. "Mom," Emily said, "who is the senator? And why did that woman look at you like she knew you?" Diane Carter didn't answer. She pulled her daughter close, glanced back once at the glowing windows of the house behind them, and started walking fast into the dark, like something back there might still be watching. They walked 6 blocks in silence before Emily spoke again. "Mom, you're scaring me." Diane stopped under a streetlight, her breath fogging in the cold. For a long moment she just looked at her daughter, really looked at her, the way she used to when Emily was a baby, and Diane would check her sleeping face every hour, terrified something would take her away. "That book," Diane finally said, "the one in my drawer. You've been reading it." It wasn't a question. Emily nodded, guilty. "I didn't teach you Latin, Em. I don't know a word of it. Someone else did." Diane's voice cracked. "Someone I haven't spoken to in 12 years. "Who?" Diane shook her head, started walking again, faster now. "Not tonight. We need to get home." But home, when they reached it, a cramped 1-bedroom above a laundromat in a part of Columbus that never made it into anyone's brochure, didn't feel safe either. Diane checked the lock twice. Then she did something Emily had never seen her do. She pulled a shoebox down from the closet shelf, one Emily had always assumed held old shoes, and opened it at the kitchen table. Inside were photographs. A younger Diane, maybe 19, laughing on some university lawn Emily didn't recognize. A man in the photos, too, tall, dark-haired, holding a book identical to the one in Emily's hands right now. "Who is that?" Emily asked, pointing. Diane's hand hovered over the photo like she was afraid to touch it. His name was Professor Alden Whitmore. Emily froze. Whitmore? Like Mrs. Whitmore? His daughter, Diane said quietly. The room seemed to tilt. Barbara Whitmore, the woman who'd just thrown them out into the cold, was the daughter of the man in the photograph. The man Diane had once known well enough to be laughing beside him on a lawn, both of them barely older than teenagers. "I was a housekeeper in his home," Diane said, staring at the photo like it might dissolve if she blinked. "Just like I am now. He was a classics professor, Latin, Greek, ancient history. He used to say I had a good ear, that I should let him teach me, just for fun, while I worked. I said yes because I liked the sound of it. I never expected—" She stopped. "Expected what?" "That I'd fall in love with it." "And with him?" Emily's mouth fell open. "Mom." "He wanted to marry me," Diane said, the words spilling now like something long dammed. "His family said no, said a housekeeper's daughter marrying into the Whitmore line would be a scandal. Barbara was already grown then, already married into money of her own, already ashamed of where her father came from, a public school teacher's son who'd worked his way up. She didn't want her father embarrassing the family further. So what happened?" Diane's eyes filled. "He died, 11 years ago. Car accident, they said. I wasn't allowed at the funeral. I wasn't allowed to say goodbye. And 2 months later," her voice broke completely. "2 months later, what?" Diane looked at her daughter, really looked at her, at the dark hair, the sharp eyes, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking, exactly the way someone else used to. "Emily, honey, I need you to listen to me very carefully," Diane whispered. "Alden Whitmore wasn't just your teacher through that book. He was your father." The words hung in the air like something breaking. "That's not possible," Emily whispered. "Mrs. Whitmore, she's my—" "Half-sister," Diane said. "Yes." Somewhere outside, a car door slammed. Diane's head snapped toward the window, every muscle in her body suddenly rigid. "Mom, what's wrong?" "Nothing," Diane said, but she was already moving, already sweeping the photographs back into the shoebox with shaking hands. "It's nothing. Get your coat." "Why? Where are we going?" Diane didn't answer right away. She was staring out the window at a black sedan idling across the street, one that hadn't been there 10 minutes ago. "Someone knows we left the house tonight," she said quietly, And I don't think Barbara Whitmore's fear was about Latin at all. A knock came at the door, 3 sharp raps. Diane pressed a finger to her lips and pulled Emily toward the fire escape. The fire escape rattled under their feet, rust flaking off in the cold. Diane pulled Emily down 2 flights before pressing them both flat against the brick wall, breath held. Below, the knocking stopped. A voice, male, calm, unfamiliar, called through the door. "Miss Carter? We just want to talk. It's about the estate. The estate. The estate." Diane's grip on Emily's hand tightened until it hurt. They didn't move for what felt like an hour, though it was probably 10 minutes. When the black sedan finally pulled away, Diane exhaled like she'd been underwater. "We can't go back up there," she whispered. "Not tonight." "Mom, who was that? What estate?" Diane didn't answer. She led Emily down the rest of the fire escape, through an alley, and into an all-night diner 3 blocks away, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and a bell over the door that jingled too cheerfully for the moment. She ordered coffee she didn't drink and a hot chocolate Emily didn't touch. "The Whitmore estate," Diane finally said, "is worth around $80 million. Alden built most of it himself. Patents, actually. Believe it or not. Before he was a professor, he designed manufacturing equipment. Barbara inherited controlling shares when he died, but there was a clause in his will, one nobody talks about." "What clause?" "Any child of his, biological, proven, inherits an equal share, automatically. No exceptions, no negotiation." Diane wrapped both hands around her mug. "Barbara has spent 11 years making sure no one ever finds out you exist." Emily felt something cold settle in her stomach. "She knew about me?" "She's known since before you were born," Diane said. "She paid me to disappear. $20,000 and a warning that if I ever came near the family or told anyone who your father was, she'd make sure I never worked in this state again. I took the money because I was scared and alone and pregnant, and I used almost all of it just keeping us fed the first 2 years." Diane's eyes were wet. "I never touched the book. I never spoke Latin around you. I didn't want you anywhere near this family." "Then how did I learn it?" Diane looked at her daughter for a long moment, something almost like awe breaking through the fear on her face. "I don't know, baby. Maybe it's just in you. Maybe some things don't need to be taught." The bell over the diner door jingled. Emily looked up out of habit and froze. A man had walked in, tall, silver-haired, wearing an overcoat too expensive for a diner like this. He scanned the room once, found their booth, and started walking straight toward them. Diane stood so fast she knocked the table, coffee sloshing over the rim of her cup. "Miss Carter." The man's voice was smooth, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. "My name is Richard Voss. I'm the Whitmore family attorney. I think we should talk, somewhere private." "We have nothing to discuss," Diane said, pulling Emily up by the shoulder. "I think you'll want to hear this before you decide that." Voss's eyes flicked to Emily, and something in his expression shifted. Recognition, calculation, the look of a man doing math in his head. "She has his eyes." "Don't look at her," Diane snapped. "Miss Carter, please." Voss held up a hand. "I'm not here on Barbara's orders. Quite the opposite, actually. I've been trying to find you for 3 years." Diane stilled. "What are you talking about?" Voss lowered his voice. "Alden changed his will 6 weeks before he died. A private codicil, filed separately, one Barbara doesn't know exists. I was his attorney for 22 years, and his friend before that. He told me if anything ever happened to him, and if there was a child, I was to find her." He glanced at Emily again. "I assumed you'd disappeared for good. Then tonight, I got a call from someone at the Whitmore estate saying a maid's daughter humiliated Bradley Henderson by speaking fluent Latin at a dinner party." A faint, sad smile. "Alden used to do that. Correct people's Latin at parties. Drove everyone crazy." Emily's chest tightened. You knew my father? I did, Voss said gently, and I have something for you that Barbara has spent 11 years hoping never surfaces. He reached into his coat and placed a sealed envelope on the table, yellowed slightly with age, Alden Whitmore's handwriting scrawled across the front. For my daughter, when she's ready. Diane made a small, broken sound. That car outside your apartment wasn't mine, Voss added quietly, glancing toward the window. Barbara has people watching you too, which means she already suspects what I just confirmed. His face turned grave. We don't have much time, Miss Carter. If Barbara finds this codicil before we file it, she'll destroy it. And I believe, given what she already did once, she won't stop there. What do you mean once? Emily asked. Voss and Diane exchanged a look. Neither of them explained. Mom, Emily's voice shook. What does he mean? Outside, the black sedan reappeared at the end of the block, headlights cutting through the dark, crawling slowly toward the diner. Diane grabbed the envelope off the table before Emily could open it. Not here. Ms. Carter, they've seen us, Voss said, already standing, already scanning for a back exit. There's a service door past the kitchen. My car's 2 blocks north. They moved fast, too fast for Emily to ask any of the 100 questions crowding her throat. The diner's fry cook barely glanced up as the 3 of them slipped past the grill and out into a service alley that smelled of old grease and cold concrete. Voss's car, a dark gray sedan nothing like the one following them, was idling exactly where he'd said. They were 3 blocks away before anyone spoke again. Start from the beginning, Diane said, twisting in the passenger seat to face Voss. What did you mean, given what she already did once? Voss's jaw tightened. His eyes stayed on the road. Alden's death wasn't an accident, Miss Carter. I've believed that for 11 years. I've never been able to prove it. Emily felt the words land like a physical blow. Diane's hand found hers in the back seat and gripped it hard. The official report said his brakes failed, Voss continued. But Alden had that car inspected 2 weeks before he died. I have the invoice. Everything was fine. He glanced in the rearview mirror, checking the road behind them out of habit that had clearly become instinct. Barbara inherited controlling interest in the company 9 days after the funeral. She fought the will for months trying to get full control, until she finally realized fighting it publicly might draw questions about a hidden heir. So instead, she found you, paid you off, and made the whole problem disappear quietly. You're saying Barbara had her own father killed? Diane's voice was barely above a whisper. I'm saying I've never been able to prove otherwise, Voss said carefully. And I'm saying that tonight, for the first time in 11 years, Barbara Whitmore is looking at the one thing that could cost her everything, a daughter with Alden's blood, his mind, and apparently, somehow, his gift for Latin she can't even explain. Emily stared down at the envelope now resting in her mother's lap. For my daughter, when she's ready. Her father, a man she'd never met, never even known existed until an hour ago, had written those words years before she was born, already imagining a version of her he'd never get to see grow up. Can I open it? She asked quietly. Diane looked at Voss. He nodded once. Emily's hands trembled as she broke the old seal. Inside was a single folded letter and a small brass key. The letter was written in careful, looping handwriting, half English, half Latin, as if the man writing it hadn't been able to decide which language held more of himself. My daughter. If you are reading this, then I never got the chance to teach you myself, and I am sorry for that more than I can say. I loved your mother in a way my family decided was inconvenient. I love you already, though I will likely never hold you. The key opens a safety deposit box at First Union Bank on 4th Street. Inside is everything Barbara doesn't want you to know, about the company, about the accident I fear may not be an accident at all, and about who you really are. Be careful of her. She is not cruel because she was born that way. She is cruel because she is afraid of losing what she believes she earned, of a father who loved a housekeeper's daughter more openly than he ever loved his own. Do not hate her, but do not trust her either. Whatever happens, know this. You were wanted. You were loved before you ever existed. Dad. Emily was crying before she finished reading. Diane pulled her close across the seat, both of them shaking now, grief and shock tangled together into something neither could name. 4th Street, Voss said quietly, first thing tomorrow, before Barbara realizes what she's dealing with. But as he said it, his phone buzzed on the dashboard. He glanced at the screen, and his face went pale. What is it? Diane asked. Voss turned the phone so they could see it. A text message from an unknown number sent 1 minute ago. We know about the codicil. We know about the box. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Richard. She knows, Voss said, foot pressing harder on the gas. She already knows. Behind them, headlights swung around the corner, the same black sedan, closing fast. Voss cut the wheel hard, tires screaming, as he turned off 4th Street onto a side road 2 blocks early. Change of plans. We go to the bank at dawn when there are witnesses. Right now we need somewhere public. The police, Diane said. We go to the police. With what? Voss's knuckles were white on the wheel. A suspicion and an 11-year-old accident report. Barbara has spent a decade building a wall around this family. We need the contents of that box first. The sedan behind them closed the distance, then suddenly slowed, hanging back at a careful, deliberate distance, not chasing anymore, just watching. Emily realized with a chill that it wasn't trying to catch them. It was making sure they knew they were being watched. Voss pulled into the fluorescent-lit parking lot of a 24-hour pharmacy, cameras mounted visibly over every entrance, and killed the engine. They won't do anything here. Too many eyes. They sat in silence, the brass key warm in Emily's fist, until the sedan eventually pulled away. Tell me the rest, Emily said, turning to her mother. All of it. No more protecting me. Diane's eyes filled, but she nodded. The night your father died, I was 6 months pregnant with you. Barbara came to see me 2 days after the funeral. She didn't yell. She was almost kind about it, told me she understood love, that she was sorry for my loss, that she wanted to make sure I was taken care of. Diane's voice hardened. Then she told me that if the baby was Alden's, I had 2 choices, take the money and vanish, or fight her in court with no lawyer, no money, and no proof, while she made certain I never found work in Ohio again. So you took it, Emily said quietly. I took it because I was terrified, and because some small, ugly part of me thought maybe she was right. Maybe I really was just a housekeeper who'd gotten in over her head. Diane wiped her eyes. I've regretted it every day since. Voss cleared his throat gently. For what it's worth, Miss Carter, no jury would blame a scared 20-year-old for taking a payout from a family with unlimited lawyers. What matters now is what's in that box. They waited out the night in a motel off the interstate. Emily curled against her mother's side, sleep coming only in fractured pieces. At 8:01 a.m., the 3 of them stood at the counter of First Union Bank on 4th Street as a teller led them to the safety deposit vault. Inside the box, a thick folder of financial records, a second inspection report on Alden's car, one showing tampered brake lines, dated 3 days before his death and never filed with police, and a video disc labeled simply, "If something happens to me." They watched it in Voss's office an hour later. Alden Whitmore's face filled the screen, tired but calm, recorded, according to the timestamp, 4 days before he died. "If you're watching this," he said, "then I was right to be afraid. Barbara believes this company is hers because she sacrificed for it. Marriage, reputation, decades of pretending our family was something it wasn't. I understand her pain, even as I fear what it's made her capable of. Richard, get this to the authorities, and if there's a child," his voice broke, just slightly, "tell her I never stopped thinking about her mother. Tell her I would have chosen them both, publicly, gladly, if I'd had more time." The recording ended. Nobody spoke for a long moment. "That's enough for a criminal investigation," Voss finally said, "and more than enough to secure your claim to the estate." It took 4 months. 4 months of lawyers, of a homicide investigation reopened, of tabloid headlines Emily was mercifully too young to fully understand, of Barbara Whitmore's composed public face finally cracking under sworn testimony about tampered brake lines and a payoff she'd once called generosity. Barbara never went to prison. There wasn't enough for a murder conviction, only obstruction and fraud, 18 months and a fortune in restitution. But the company, the inheritance, the truth, all of it came out into the light exactly the way Alden had hoped it eventually would. Emily didn't want the money, not really, not at 11. What she wanted was sitting in a small clay urn on a shelf in Voss's office, waiting to be moved somewhere better, a grave with her father's name on it, finally, one she could visit. On a warm afternoon in May, Diane stood beside her at the newly placed headstone, the Latin engraving Emily herself had chosen, etched clean and deep into gray granite. Amata Semper. Always loved. Emily reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the worn leather book, the one with no title, the pages soft as moth wings, and pressed her palm flat against the cover. "I understand you now," she whispered, in Latin, to a father she'd never met and somehow already knew.